Hi everyone, we're doing a concept sketch today of a little ASLR camera, a little retro design from the 1950s, and at this stage we're doing the preliminary construction lines using a Faber-Castell Polychroma pencil, and it happens to be a phthalo blue if I'm not mistaken. Now if you can see in the video there, and it's a fairly low quality take, but we've massed out the basic form to get the overall shape as if you're getting the camera and just putting it in a box. And as long as you can mass out the basic geometric forms, you can progressively build into that initial shape in order to get the form to progressively build out on the page. So at this stage we're massing out the body of the camera where the film goes in. We're breaking it up into its component parting planes, and you can see there we're using construction lines in blue pencil to get the sense of the curves on the end of the camera body. Some sense of light coming from the upper right hand side, and in this case I've got the light coming in from the window adjacent to my studio. Now we've built some of the secondary forms into the design, so we've got the viewfinder, the film spools on either end, some of the control mechanisms around that, and we work fairly loosely initially. We don't become too precious. We're sort of shaping the design like moulding clay, as it were, and pulling and pushing and pulling the elements as we move along. Now basically if you see a mistake as you're doing it, you just let your eyes be the judge. So even though we're adopting the policies that you've been learning in class, at the end of the day you make sure that you're checking it yourself. So if it looks wrong, you make the adjustment as you go along. We're not going too far into the design at this stage, so we're not trying to come up with a polished pencil drawing by any means. We're providing the basic framework that the rest of the design will be drawn off. And in this particular case we're taking an additive and subtractive form approach, which means we're doing a construction phase to the drawing, then a line drawing, and then we're rendering over the top after that. So this is one possible approach. It's by no means the only approach that you can take in this regard. So now we've basically got the construction phase pretty much finished at this point. There's enough there in order for me to build a concept sketch, sense of the lens structure, the body of the camera, some of the control surfaces, and from this point we just start to move as quickly as possible into the ink stage of the drawing. I'm using a Staedtler Lumicolor extra fine and an Artline 210 pen, just so it can be seen on screen. Normally I'd use a finer point pen for a lot of the work, but in this particular case, because we're working rather quickly and at A3 size, I wanted a decent chunky pen to give us some sense of image. So we're lining out the lens structure at this point. Again, not being slavish about following the pencil lines. If I see an error, and I try to be gestural in my line work, that way it's not too precious. And that way the viewer will make all of the necessary corrections when they're looking at the image for the most part. So I want it to look loose and sketchy as a concept sketch. I'm not trying to be too precise. Okay, you can see how it's lining out there now. And we're thinking about the form of the design and the various details we want to express. Trying to get some sense of light coming in from the right hand side of the image in this particular case. I'm trying to restrict, but I'm doing it fairly roughly, but I'm trying to have thick lines on the left hand side of the drawing and the lighter lines or more broken lines on the right hand side of the drawing. So that way, when we're doing the pen and ink stage, it's automatically reinforcing the three-dimensional effect of the drawing. Okay, you can see how the details are slowly being generated on the page, and it's an iterative process, so we're progressively building up the design. Bringing out the finer detail. And looking at the secondary design features. So we try and come up with a believable image as we move through the drawing process, but at the same time we're not being so precious about it that we're taking hours and hours and hours. We're just, it's a 15-minute sketch in order to generate some interest on the design idea. Providing ourselves with a clean silhouette to the drawing by using the Artline 210 as a medium weight line, as a profile line around the drawing to give us a clear silhouette. And there we have our finished pen and ink stage. Jumping in now and throwing on the marker. Cool greys at this point. The black body is done as a cool grey 5 with a cool grey 7 wash over the top. I've left the highlight line in place, which I'll fill in with a cool grey 3 afterwards. I'm trying to create higher contrast over the portion of the body which is glossy, so we're using cool grey 7 on that section and allowing the cool grey 5 to rest on the matte portion of the rendering. Bringing in the shadowed sides of the object, and as long as you can think of the lit face, front face and return face of the product, and then render accordingly. So the shaded side of the object, it seems fairly obvious, but the shaded side of the object has the darkest tones. If you've got a light reflective material, let the colour of the page do the work for you. And you can see very quickly using Copic markers we've got a three-dimensional rendered image coming together. Building up the values on the lit surfaces so we can differentiate between the lit face and the front face of the product. Creating reflective contrast on the glossy materials, so we're increasing the values there with a cool grey 9. Blending some of the surfaces in. If it's consistently rough, it'll read effectively. It's when you've got a perfect section and then a rough section next to it that your eye is drawn to any errors on the drawing. Ultimately, this is a relatively quick sketch, so consequently it's fairly rough. We're just trying to create an image that works for us in terms of communicating the design idea. Adding a little bit of sky tone in those areas that are reflecting the lit surfaces, just stereotypically. Create an indicative chrome effect. Coming back in and sculpting the design a little bit with a Copic black, give us a decent chunky profile line, so we're cutting the image clear of the page. Adding some white highlights with a gel pen. Coming back and just tidying up some of the line work, or adding a little bit of gestural line work. Refining the shadows just to get some sharpness here and there. Coming back in with some white out for a few spot highlights. Try not to overdo that on your drawings. And doing some fine tuning techniques. Some textural elements on the body of the camera. Using a black Copic marker. Gesturing in the strap. Adding a little bit of earth tone, this time with a violet pencil. Increasing the tonal value on the return face. Hiding a few mistakes with the shadows there. Increasing the contrast where you want the eye to be drawn, but just enough to carry the day. Providing a little bit of background or a ground plane for it to sit on, so I just inferred a little bit of textural shadow around the object at the end of the day. Coming back in. Messing around. Removing some of the excess pencil work in a few key areas just to increase the highlight. Sharpening things up. Getting a thicker line of the change of planes. Adding some gestural line work. So you can see we can work over this and progressively build up the detail of the image, but it's a matter of knowing when the right time to stop is and making sure you add an annotation to the drawing so you can reference the work that's been done, and it's part of the presentation as well. Okay.